Mr. Chairman. Let me, before I ask my question, just make the point that the last Congress, we did have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We had the fastest wage growth in 2 generations. We had the highest consumer confidence in over a generation. All this is February of 2020, pre-COVID, which upset a lot of things. So I think we did do a lot of things that, frankly, we can be proud of and the American people benefited from. Mr. Smith, let me start with you. I'm sure you would agree with the old truism that flawed process normally brings you a flawed legislative product, and the Speaker's often been quoted, and I agree with the quote, that show me your budget, I'll show you your values. I think those things are true. And I remember when I served on the Budget Committee, I had the privilege of serving with my good friend, now the chairman of the full committee. We actually marked up a budget every single year I was on the Budget Committee. So I'm curious, did you have any opportunity to mark up this legislation this year or even a House alternative to it?
Thank you, Ranking Member Cole, for the question. To make it very simple, people, when I say we'd like to work together, the last budget resolution bypassed the committee, unprecedented, went straight to the floor without a hearing, without any input for my Republican colleagues and myself to make any amendments. During the organizational hearing of the House Budget Committee, I asked Chairman Yarmuth directly if the next budget would have a committee hearing and would be on the floor. And he said yes, but this is the next budget. And we have went straight to the Rules Committee. We've never had the opportunity to mark up this budget or have a committee hearing in the House Budget Committee.
Well, so to be absolutely clear, in 2 years, the majority hasn't presented a budget to the Budget Committee in either year. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the whole process, hasn't been a process to discuss and address the fiscal trajectory of the nation, but rather it's minimized the ability of rank and file members, frankly, of both parties, to provide input, and also it's been used to short circuit the deliberative process of the Senate to pass legislation that fails to meet the 60-vote threshold?
That's correct.
Okay, another question. I want to drill down a little further on the issue of inflation. As you noted, annualized inflation is already up 7% and appears to be on track to reach the highest rate since 1981. Given that, the so-called American Rescue Plan Act injected massive stimulus in the economy, which a number of economists, frankly, from both sides of the aisle, have pointed to as an important factor in the rise of inflation. What would the resolution before us today that's been associated with the reconciliation bill to either exacerbate or reduce inflation?
You know, Mr. Cole, the budget resolution before us will only fuel the inflation. Economists, Democrat economists, early on, at the beginning of the last budget resolution, said that our economy did not need additional spending, but yet the Democrats still passed the $1.9 trillion Biden bailout bill. And inflation has only increased 7% since that time. And the shared values that I think every member of Congress would have is that they're concerned about their constituents' paychecks, their hard-earned paychecks. And by inflation going up 7%, that means the men and women who we represent has 7% less in spending to purchase clothes on their back, food on their tables, and put gasolines in their car. And so this is drastically affecting the real men and women who we represent. And I think we all want to put a stop to this inflation. And it's just, even without one more additional dollar worth of spending, we are projected this year of revenues at being 12%. That's the highest that it's been in 8 years. So why spend another $3.5 trillion? It's wasteful, reckless spending, and we are already on the road, Ranking Member Cole, to have the highest inflation since 1981 with any more additional spending. But when you add another $3.5 trillion, wait to see that gasoline on that fire of inflation. It's not going to be good for the people you and I represent.
My friends on the other side, and you just laid out what the consequences of inflation are for every single American. It doesn't matter what your income level is, but it particularly hits those with the least the most. So just is this effectively, in your view, a tax on every American, whether you have a tax increase or not? If you take government actions that push up the prices of the necessities that we all require, isn't that effectively taxing people?
Inflation is a direct tax on every American.
And again, to follow up on a point you made, but I want to get it into the record, those concerns aren't simply partisan. Prominent Democrats like Jason Furman, who served as the chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, and Larry Summers, who served as President Clinton's Treasury Secretary, have they not expressed these same concerns?
Absolutely. We cannot inflate our way out of inflation.
Let's move on now to the subject of taxes. My Democratic colleagues state that the legislation before us today would prevent them from raising taxes on those making more than $400,000 a year. Do you agree with that assertion?
That's absolutely not true. There's provisions within this budget resolution that shows that they will allow the Tax Cut and Jobs Act to expire, and that will be tax increases to the people that make less than $400,000 a year. And plus, the rising cost of inflation is a direct tax on all Americans, even those Americans who make less than $400,000 a year. There is nothing in this budget resolution that provides that no tax increases to people under $400,000, and to say otherwise is a complete lie.
Well, indeed, in the instruction included in the resolution, are there any limits on potential tax increases that could be included?
Absolutely not. There's a minimum. That the minimum is at least a $1.8 trillion tax increase, but it doesn't end the ceiling. The ceiling could be any amount that the committees of jurisdiction decide, but the minimum is tax increases of $1.8 trillion.
My friends make a major point out of the reduction in the corporate income tax rate in the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was signed into law. We saw a cut in the corporate tax rate, but did we also see, a return of businesses to the United States, an increase in growth and prosperity, an increase in jobs?
We absolutely did. The economy grew exponentially after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It's very alarming that the proposal by the Biden administration and the House and Senate Democrats to increase our taxes on job creators would in fact raise our taxes on job creators higher than that of communist China. That's a problem. And what that does to small manufacturers and businesses in Southeast Missouri and all over this country, it basically says you need to fire your employees, close shop, and move to China because you will be treated better from a tax advantage under the proposal within this budget resolution, which is horrendous.
Is there anything in the budget resolution that would actually move us toward paying down the debt or stabilizing some of our existing entitlement programs?
Absolutely not. In fact, it does the complete opposite. It adds over $17 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. That's the largest amount of debt over any single budget period. In fact, the $17 trillion in debt is more debt than the GDP of any country in the world except the United States.
I've seen the Senate Budget Committee print, which outlines their assumptions on which the reconciliation bill is based. It reads like a progressive policy wish list. Their assumptions range from climate change initiatives, which would raise the cost of American energy and eliminate American jobs, to the elimination of right-to-work protections. Can you please expand on your concerns, the impact of some of those policies might have on the economy?
The policies that is proposed within this budget resolution, which then leads to the reconciliation bill, are exactly fueling all the crisis that we currently have, whether it is the Biden border crisis, whether it is the Biden energy crisis, whether it's the Biden inflation crisis, or whether it's now the Biden Afghanistan crisis. This budget resolution only makes those crises worse. For example, providing millions of amnesty to illegal immigrants. For example, flatlining our defense budget. In fact, our defense budget will be the lowest at the end of this budget window that it has been in 80 years by GDP. 80 years. And we see what's going on in Afghanistan. We see what's going on at the border and the inflation crisis. When you recklessly spend another $3.5 trillion, you talk about the price of goods and services for our constituents. They're going to feel the pain and they're going to have less of a paycheck.
Well, as you implied in your response, budgets not only spend money, they're important for what they don't spend money on sometimes. So you mentioned specifically the lowest percentage of the budget spent on defense in 80 years. Is there any money in here to protect the homeland in terms of the southern border or homeland security?
You know, Speaker Pelosi says a budget is a statement of your values. When you look at this budget, 0% of an increase to homeland. In fact, not one additional dollar for our border. And we are facing the worst border crisis in decades. It shows a priority.
Well, and I would just echo that and add again to your point, we live in an awfully dangerous world. The idea that we would effectively have an inflation effective cut in defense spending under this budget is alarming, particularly given the increasing assertiveness and aggressive activities of the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans. What kind of signal do you think this budget sends to them?
It definitely shows that we're not investing in our homeland, we're not investing in our national defense and national security. But you look across the board, and everything that is non-defense or homeland has an average of a 16% increase across the board. That is what is showing the folks across the water.
I think it's safe to say there won't be a lot of Republican support for this particular budget. So with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.